Hi guys, this is the second installment of Hat Lady McTeacher's crazy distance teaching attempt. I'm going to try to read the rest of Winter 1935 from Out of the Dust by Karen Hess. Hopefully I won't get interrupted by my children. Give it a shot. Time to go. They left a couple weeks after the baby came. All of them crammed inside that rusty old truck. I ran half a mile in their dust to catch them. I didn't want to let that baby go. Wait for me, I cried, choking on the cloud that rose behind them. But they didn't hear me. They were heading west, and no one was looking back. February 1935. Something sweet from moonshine. Ashby Derwin and his pal Rush had themselves a fine operation on the Cimarron River, where the water still runs a little, though the fish are mostly dead from the dust floating on the surface. Ashby and Rush were cooking up moonshine in their giant metal still on the bank when Sheriff Robertson caught them. He found jugs of finished whiskey and barrels of mash. He found 2 sacks of rye, and he found sugar, 1,000 pounds of sugar. The government men took Ashby and Rush off to Enid for breaking the law, but Sheriff Robertson stayed behind, took apart the still, washed away the whiskey and the mash, and thought about that sugar. All that sugar, 1/2 ton of sugar. Sheriff decided some should find its way into the mouths of us kids. Bake for them, Miss Freeland, he said. Bake them cakes and cookies and pies. Cook them custard and cobbler and crisp. Make them candy and taffy and apple pandowdy. Apple pandowdy? These kids, Sheriff Robertson said, ought to have something sweet to wash down their dusty milk. And so we did. February 1935. Dreams. Each day, after class lets out, each morning before it begins, I sit at the school piano and make my hands work. In spite of the pain, in spite of the stiffness and scars, I make my hands play piano. I have practiced my best piece over and over till my arms throb, because Thursday night, the Palace Theater is having a contest. Any man, woman, or child who sings, dances, reads, or plays worth a lick can climb onto that stage. Just register by 4 p.m. and give them a taste of what you can do, and you're in. Performing for the crowd, warming up the audience for the Hazelhurd players. I figure if I practice enough, I won't shame myself. And we sure could use the extra cash if I won. $3 first prize, $2 second, $1 third. But I don't know if I could win anything, not anymore. It's the playing I want most, the proving I can still do it, without Arlie making excuses. I have a hunger for more than food. I have a hunger bigger than Joyce City. I want tongues to tie and eyes to shine at me like they do at Mad Dog Craddock. Of course, they never will, not with my hands all scarred up, looking like the earth itself, all parched and rough and cracking. But if I played right enough, maybe they would see past my hands. Maybe they could feel at ease with me again. And maybe then I could feel at ease with myself. February 1935. The competition. I suppose everyone in Joyce City and beyond, all the way to Felt and Keys and even Guymon, came to watch the talent show at the Palace Thursday night. Backstage, we were 17 amateur acts, our wild hearts pounding, our lips sticking to our teeth, our urge to empty ourselves top and bottom made a sorry sight in front of the famous Hazelhurd players. But they were kind to us, helped us with our makeup and our hair, showed us where to stand, how to bow, and the quickest route to the toilet. The audience hummed on the other side of the closed curtain. Ivy Huxford kept peeking out and giving reports of who was there and how she never saw so many seats filled in the palace, and that she didn't think they could squeeze a rattlesnake into the back even if you paid full price. The place was so packed. My father told me he'd come once chores were done. I guess he did. The Grover boys let us off. They worked a charm, Baby on the sax, Jake on the banjo, and Ben on the clarinet. The Baker family followed, playing just like they do at home every night after dinner. They didn't look nervous at all. The tap dancers, they rattled the teeth in their jaws and the eyeballs in their skulls, their feet flying, their arms swinging, their mouths gapping. Then Sunny Lee Hallam tumbled and leaped onto the stage, the sweat flying off of her, spotting the palace floor. Marsh Wharton struggled out, his accordion leading the way. George and Agnes Harkins ran their fingers over the strings of their harps, made you want to look up into the heavens for angels, but only scenery and lights and ropes and sandbags hung overhead. And then there was me on piano. I went on somewhere near the backside of middle, getting more and more jittery with each act, time till my time came. I played Bye Bye Blackbird my own way, messing with the tempo, and the first part sounded like I used just my elbows, but the middle sounded good. And the end, I forgot I was even playing in front of the packed Palace Theater. I dropped right inside the music and didn't feel anything till after, when the clapping started. And that's when I noticed my hands hurting straight up to my shoulders. But the applause made me forget the pain. The audience roared when I finished. They came to their feet, and I got third prize, $1. While Mad Doc Craddock, singing 1 second, and Ben Grover and his crazy clarinet took first. The tap dancers pouted into their mirrors, peeling off their makeup and their smiles. Birdie Jasper claimed it was all my fault she didn't win, that the judges were just being nice to a cripple. But the Harp and Harkins were kind, and the Hazel Hurd players wrapped their long arms around me and said I was swell. And in the sweaty, dim chaos backstage, I ignored the pain running up and down my arms. I felt like I was part of something grand. But they had to give my ribbon and my dollar to my father, because I couldn't hold anything in my hands. February 1935. The piano player. Arlie says, "We're doing a show in a week, Billie Joe. Come play with us." If I asked my father, he'd say yes. It's okay with him if I want to play. He didn't even know I was at the piano again till the other night. He's making some kind of effort to get on better with me now, since I did him proud at the Palace. But I say no. It's too soon after the contest. It still hurts too much. Arlie doesn't understand. Just practice more, he says. You'll get it back. You can travel with us again this summer if you'd like. I don't say it hurts like the parched earth with each note. I don't say one chord and my hands scream with pain for days. I don't show him the swelling or my tears. I tell him, I'll try. At home, I sit at Ma's piano. I don't touch the keys. I don't know why. I play stormy weather in my mind, following the phrases in my imagination, saving strength, so that when I sit down at a piano that is not Ma's, when everyone crowds into the school for Arlie's show, no one can say that Billie Joe Kelby plays like a cripple. March 1935. No good. I did play like a cripple at Arlie's show. Not that Arlie would ever say it, but my hands are no good anymore. My playing's no good. Arlie understands, I think. He won't ask again. March 1935. Snow. Had to check yesterday morning to make sure that was snow on the ground, not dust. But you can't make a dust ball pack together and slam against the side of the barn and echo across the fields, so I know it was snow. March 1935. Night school. My father thought maybe he ought to go to night school, so if the farm failed, there'd be prospects to fall back on. He's starting to sound like Ma. The farm won't fail, I tell him, long as we get some good rain. I'm starting to sound like him. It's mostly ladies in those classes, he says. They take bookkeeping and civics and something called business English. I can't imagine him taking any of those things, but maybe he doesn't care so much about the classes. Maybe he's thinking more about the company of ladies. I'll bet none of the ladies mind spending time with my father. He's still good looking, with his strong back and his blondie red hair and his high cheeks rugged with wind. I shouldn't mind either. It's a dinner I don't have to come up with, because the ladies bring chicken and biscuits for him. I'm glad to get out of cooking. Sometimes with my hands it's hard to keep the fire, wash the pans, hold the knife and spread a little butter. But I do mind him spending time with all those biddies. I turn my back on him as he goes and settle myself in the parlor and touch Ma's piano. My fingers leave sighs in the dust. March 1935. If you go back and read that poem again, you can see that Billie Joe has pretty strong feelings about not wanting her father to go to night school. And that's another response that you can write in your journal. The prompt being, how does Billie Joe feel about her dad going to night school and why? Do you think her feelings are justified? Do you think she has a right to feel that way? How come? Dust pneumonia. 2 Fridays ago, Pete Gaimon drove in with a truck full of produce. He joked with Calb Hardley, Mr. Hardley's son, while they unloaded eggs and cream down at the store. Pete Gaimon teased Calb Hardley about the Wildcats losing to Hooker. Calb Hardley teased Pete Gaimon about his wheezy truck sucking in dust. Last Friday, Pete Gaimon took ill with dust pneumonia. Nobody knew how to keep that produce truck on the road. It sat, filled with turkeys and heavy hens waiting for delivery. It sat out in front of Pete's drafty shack and sits there still, the cream curdling, the apples going soft. Because a couple of hours ago, Pete Gaimon died. Mr. Hardley was already on the phone to a new produce supplier before evening. He had people in his store and no food to sell them. His boy, Calb, slammed the basketball against the side of the house until Calb's ma yelled for him to quit. And late that night, a truck rattled up to the store with colored springs, dozens of hens, filthy eggs, and a driver with no interest whatsoever in young Calb Hardley or his precious Wildcats. March 1935. Dust storm. I never would have gone to see the show if I had known a storm like this would come. I didn't know when going in, but coming out, a darker night I'd never seen. I bumped into a box beside the palace door and scraped my shins, then tripped on something in my path, I don't know what, and walked into a phone pole, bruised my cheek. The first car that I met was sideways in the road. Bowed down, my eyes near shut, trying to keep the dust out. I saw his headlights just before I reached them. The driver called me over and I felt my way, following his voice. He asked me how I kept the road. I feel it with my feet, I shouted over the roaring wind. I walk along the edge, 1 foot on the road, 1 on the shoulder. And desperate to get home, he straightened out his car and straddled the tires on the road and off and slowly pulled away. I kept along. I know that there were others on the road. From time to time, I'd hear someone cry out. Their voices rose like ghosts on the howling wind no one could see. I stopped at neighbors just to catch my breath and made my way from town out to our farm. Everyone said to stay, but I guessed my father would come out to find me if I didn't show and get himself lost in the raging dust and maybe die, and I didn't want that burden on my soul. Brown earth rained down from the sky. I could not catch my breath. The way the dust pressed on my chest and wouldn't stop. The dirt blew down so thick it scratched my eyes and stung my tender skin. It plugged my nose and filled inside my mouth. No matter how I pressed my lips together, the dust made muddy tracks across my tongue. But I kept on, spitting out mud, covering my mouth, clamping my nose, the dust stinging the raw and open stripes of scarring on my hands. And after some 3 hours, I made it home. Inside, I found my father's note that said he'd gone to find me, and if I should get home to just stay put. I hollered out the front door and the back. He didn't hear. I didn't think he would. The wind took my voice and busted it into 1,000 pieces. So small, the sound blew out over Ma and Franklin's grave, thinner than a sigh. I waited for my father through the night, coughing up dust, cleaning dust out of my ears, rinsing my mouth, blowing mud out of my nose. Joe Delafleur stopped by around 4 to tell me they found one boy tangled in a barbed wire fence, another smothered in a drift of dust. After Joe left, I thought of the famous Lindberghs and how their baby was killed and never came back to them. I wondered if my father would ever come back. He blew in around 6 a.m. It hurt, the sight of him, brown with dirt, his eyes red as raw meat, his feet bruised from walking in worn shoes, stepping where he couldn't see, on things that bit and cut into his flesh. I tried to scare up something we could eat, but couldn't keep the table clear of dust. Everything I set down for our breakfast was covered before we took a bite, and so we chewed the grit and swallowed. And I thought of the cattle, dead from mud in their lungs, and I thought of the tractor, buried up to the steering wheel, and Pete Gaimon, and I couldn't even recognize the man sitting across from me, sagging in his chair, his red hair gray and stiff with dust, his face deep lines of dust, his teeth streaked brown with dust. I turned the plates and glasses upside down, crawled into bed, and slept. March 1935. Broken promise. It rained a little everywhere but here. March 1935. Motherless. If Ma could put her arm across my shoulder sometime, or stroke back my hair, or sing me to sleep, making the soft sounds, the reassuring noises, that no matter how brittle and sharp life seemed, no matter how brittle and sharp she seemed, she was still my Ma who loved me, then I think I wouldn't be so eager to go. March 1935. Think about that last line, how she says, I think I wouldn't be so eager to go. The author is using foreshadowing here to make us think about what's going to happen. Following in his steps. Hayden Parley Nye's wife, Fonda, died today, 2 months after she lost her man. The cause of death was dust pneumonia, but I think she couldn't go on without Hayden. When Ma died, I didn't want to go on either. I don't know. I don't feel the same now, not exactly. Now that I see that one day comes after another and you get through them one measure at a time. But I'd like to go. Not like Fonda Nye. I don't want to die. I just want to go away, out of the dust. March 1935.